need a blank chair for her. It's going to be my...
Pardon? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. No, he gave me this one. He gave me this one. Which is this one. I need both. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are ready to start. Ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to start. Thank you so much for your indulgence to join us for this session here today. As we have our distinguished ministers from our member states, but I wanted to give a bit of background before I can introduce them to you. All of us are aware of the theme of the World Water Week this year, which is seeing the unseen, valuing water. And if we will all agree that in the many sessions we've engaged in our discussions on how to improve the governance and effectiveness of our management structures in water resources management and also water services provision, we always highlight the issue of limited or inadequacies in the resource management capabilities and also the knowledge that we have of our resources. And the indicators for this are usually, yes, we've got designs, we've got institutions that have been set up, but to what extent are they operationalized? We talk about policies, it's the same thing. Most of our countries have got very good policies on paper, but to what extent are they being implemented? Same thing with the laws, how are they being enforced? And oftentimes we come to, and it's a reality that it sometimes boils down to incommensurate funding to our sector in order to be able to implement all the designs and also the setups that we've agreed upon. Now, here comes also a bit of a challenge for us because as AMCOW, for those of you that are aware of the Sharm el-Sheikh Declaration, a key commitment therein is for us to enable the engagement of ministers of finance and ministers of water in order for them to increase the investments to the sector. And since that was done in 2008, we've had mixed results in trying to implement it. And I think the time has come for us to consider infusing new approaches to how we get that discussion going, to get them to speak at the same level. And the opportunities are there because I think from what we are going to be discussing this afternoon, there are principles of valuing water, which have been agreed upon and are in practice in some countries, maybe not to a large extent in Africa, but they exist. And this is an opportunity for us. So what we are having here is for us to be able to talk about how to build the business case for investing in the sector. And that should eventually lead to improving the investment outlook for the sector. That is the framing of our session today. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you the presenters. We shall have two segments of this session. The first segment will be the technical aspect, which will be to have the custodians of these principles or the promoters of these principles share with us what they have planned or what has been agreed at a technical level and what they're promoting that can enable us achieve that goal. So we'll have presentations from the UNSEEA, the Chief Environment, Madame Alessandra Alfieri, who is the Chief Environmental Economic Accounts Section Department, who will be talking to us about the system of environmental accounting for water. Then we'll also have, I think since that was put in place and its implementation, at the beginning of the Water Action Decade, we had the High-level Panel on Water that made recommendations on the principles of valuing water. I believe a secretariat has been set up and a lot of work has been going on. What can you share with us that can also elevate the cause that we are promoting in Africa, and how can that benefit our member states, again, with the eye on improving the investment outlook and also increasing domestic allocations to the water sector. So originally we were supposed to have Ambassador Henk Omvik, the special envoy for the Netherlands on international water affairs, and he has got a representative who will also be sharing with us that experience. Then we'll narrow it down to the member states that are already doing this. So we shall have a contribution from the Republic of Botswana, which has linked its national water information to the system of national accounts. And that will also, they will share their experience. Then that will be the technical element. They will have a presentation from Botswana. And then we shall now take it to our political leadership. If these technical solutions exist, how can they help us to propel this to the fore and therefore become the framework with which we plan for and also raise the profile of water's contribution, or the valuing of water within our systems for planning for national development. So we'll have our honorable ministers from the Republic of Namibia, Honorable Karl Hermann Gustav Schletvin, the Minister for Agriculture, Water and Land Reform from the Republic of Namibia, and also AMCOW's president. We'll also have Honorable Engineer Suleiman Adam, the Federal Minister for Water Resources of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and also AMCOW Vice President. He also represents a key member or a key constituent of AMCOW, which is he's the chair of the Council of Ministers of the Lake Chad Basin Commission. He's also here with us. He'll be sharing that experience with us. And that has very significant implications, because if we look at the drying up of Lake Chad and the multiple other externalities that have come that can be attributed to that, I think we'll have a rich experience from him. Then we have from Republic of South Africa, Honorable Senzo Mchunu, who will also be sharing with us the experience from the policy angle from South Africa. South Africa is one of the member states in the African Union that has extensive application of this system of national accounts for water. We can learn something from them, and we are hoping what have they done from the policy angle that can benefit other member states to make this the enabling environment for valuing water, for raising the profile of water. From Ethiopia, we shall have His Excellency Dr. Asfao Dingamo Kame, who is the Minister of State for Water Supply and Sanitation. He will also be representing the AMCOW Vice President for Eastern Africa. Mozambique, we have a representative for the Vice President for Southern Africa in the name of Mr. Helio Manuel Yeremias Banze, who is the Permanent Secretary for the Ministry of Public Works and Housing and Water Resources. Then we have from Northern Africa, a representative from our Vice President from Northern Africa, Mr. Monane Sadu Ebi, who will be representing the Vice President for Northern Africa. And then from Egypt, we have a representative of the Minister of Water Resources and Irrigation of Egypt, Dr. Tahani Sleti, who will be representing him. So without further ado, I think we shall go into the technical sessions immediately, having the first presentation from UNDESA, Madame Alessandra.
Yeah, there should be. No, no. It's Alessandra Alfieri, is that one? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for this nice introduction and for being able to participate in this panel with this distinguished delegates from all over Africa. I'd like to just to focus the 5 minutes that I have for my intervention in giving a little bit of background on the system of environmental economic accounting, which was adopted as a statistical standard. The first part, what we call the central framework, which deals with the relationship between the economy and the environment in 1992, and in 2002, and then the system of ecosystem accounts, which was adopted just a year and a half ago. So basically, I don't know why the slides are not coming up, but I just would like to give a little bit of a it shows. Perfect. So just by a way of a background, what is the system of environmental economic accounting? It is an information system which uses the same principle as the system of national accounts, as was mentioned before, and it integrates information from different sources. So it's the water information, which is linked in particular with economic information, environmental information, information on water, on agriculture, and ecosystems. So the idea is to integrate all this data to produce an integrated set of accounts, which is to support policy and decision making, and in particular economic policies. And I mean, I'm happy that there will be presentation from countries that have already had experience in implementing these accounts. So the idea is really moving away from the silo approach, where different ministries have different information which they collect for their own decision making, for their own policies, and try to integrate this basic data using the accounting approach and linking so the economic with the water information to develop a set of indicators which is consistent over time and across countries. So the idea is really to move towards a systematic collection of data, of integrated data to support integrated policy. The sector of water is very much disaggregated, with different ministries dealing with particular aspects of water, and often speak among each other. And I think it's important that the discussion on water is elevated beyond the water ministries and beyond the environment ministries. And we use what the SEA does is using this framework to really try to engage more with the finance ministers and have a language which is attuned to the discussion of what the finance ministers are using. So we have two SEA, let's say, or two parts of the same framework. One is what we call the central framework and takes the perspective of the economy and measures in particular water is used by the economy in terms of abstraction. They use the circularity of water within the economy and then how it is returned back to the environment and the emissions back to the environment. And we also look at expenditures and fees and taxes that are related to water. So also the aspects of financing of water is very much tracked as part of the SEA central framework. What recently what was adopted in a year and a half ago is the ecosystem accounts, which takes very much an ecosystem perspective. So it's spatially explicit. So it identifies, for example, the freshwater ecosystem, the extent, what is the condition of the water which is there, and what are the services that this ecosystem provide in terms, for example, of water purification, water regulation, and how it interacts also with the other ecosystems and with the economy and well-being. So this is basically, in essence, what the SEA does, and the idea is really to integrate this information in the regular production process. So as was mentioned before, we have a number of countries that are implementing the SEA. We have about 90 countries that are implementing it. I looked at the case of water. We have 68 countries in the world implementing the SEA, but only 7 are implementing the SEA, the water accounts. So there is really a need to step up the implementation and to move towards a regular production of this water data, which is actually integrated within the statistical process and linked with the system of national accounts, as was mentioned before. So I mean, the challenge, but I think also the opportunities in the implementation of the SEA is having this interinstitutional collaboration. So the idea is really bringing together people from different ministries that collect information on water, but also the users, to identify what the priorities are and bringing basically all the information together in an integrated system, which is also an information which is accepted because it has been generated as a collective process within the government. I mean, and every institution has its own role to play. The National Statistical Offices, I mean, and we hear it also, we'll hear from South Africa, the Stats SA had a very important role in the development of the accounts and in the release of the accounts, but it had to also very much rely on the experience and expertise that that is in other ministries. So the idea really, what the implementation of the SEA does is give an opportunity to bring all the different stakeholders together, including also the Ministry of Planning and Ministry of Finance, the academia that has an expertise. It really promotes this interinstitutional mechanism and tries to break these silos. So why the SEA? I mean, it makes nature counts within the economic planning and decision making. So it makes the information on the table for people to discuss, and information which is credible, which is reliable, because it has been developed through these interinstitutional processes and collaboration. Standardization is important, so we have to move away from, let's say, ad hoc production of data, maybe for a specific purpose, towards a more regular production process, and to obtain the high quality and comparable statistics. Also, I mentioned before this idea of collaboration, which is really important. And the idea also of integrating this with the system of national accounts is really bringing together different stakeholders that until now have not really been sitting on the table in the case of the water discussion. And then also the derivation of indicators. The indicators are more consistent and coherent. And now we are, for example, having a discussion in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, which will be adopted in December this year. And they actually recognize that the SEA is an important framework for deriving the biodiversity indicators, including link to the freshwater ecosystems. And of course, the SDGs, the SEA informs more than 40 SDG indicators. And climate change, there are initiatives towards, for example, the new data gap initiative of the G20 is now developing recommendation for developing indicators related to climate change based on the SEA. And these are linked in particular on energy and emission accounts, but also issues of expenditures and subsidies and green economy. So the idea is to develop an integrated information system that can bring together the different stakeholders. There is a need to step up the implementation, and really we look forward to working together with this community to advance the measurement agenda in water. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alessandra. I think what I'll encourages you have a seat, and then we have the other technical presentation, and then we can field questions relating to this. If I may, I invite you, Martin, to help us with your discussion.
Yeah, Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, I was not expecting to be here because Henk Ovink was here, was going to speak here. I understand he is at the moment sitting next to the Crown Princess of Sweden, and well, diplomatic protocol dictates that you dare not run off and go to a session. So I'll try to replace him. I'll talk about the Valuing Water initiative that we established in 2018 and that tries to operationalize the Valuing Water principles. I'll say something about transition processes that Africa and every country on earth will have to go through in the coming years. I will then say something about the values perspectives that play a role in those. I'll say something, well, what could that mean for Africa? I can just do some suggestions and you know much better what that means, and then make a link to the UN 2023 conference. In the next decades, Africa, like other countries and continents, will go through major transition in energy, in urban space, in ecosystems, in industry, and in infrastructure. And that will be driven by growth. It will also be driven by climate change, or necessitated by climate change. And so, like every society, we will need to redefine our relationship with water as an enabler and as a constraint. In Africa in particular, urbanization will be a big thing. The urban population will double. In the Africa Infrastructure Investment Panel, we heard 400 million Africans do not have access to safe drinking water, 800 million to safe sanitation. That is a major challenge, and that is a major challenge that will concentrate in the urban space. Now, because water is so many different things to so many different stakeholders, a lot of values are at stake. Water's economic values, cultural values, social values, environmental values. Because it flows through all the veins of our society, of our economy, and through all the veins of nature. So in that context, a values lens is useful. So who has which values, and to what extent do those values resonate in our institutions, in the decisions, in the decision-making processes? And because different groups have different values perspectives, it's not, I mean, in the IWRM space, there's a lot of, we need to get every stakeholder at the table. But I think what is also important, so what are the different values perspectives at the table? And if you want to transition from something that we have now and that sort of degrades water resources, if you want to transition to something that doesn't, the balance of these values perspectives will have to change. So in its 2018 outcome document, the High-level Panel on Water said we have to manage, we have to understand, value, and manage water better. And the Valuing Water initiative that was launched in 2019 tries to operationalize that. How do we do that? And I think in your introduction, you said, well, maybe we don't apply those principles. I think every one of us applies in some way or other the 5 principles of the High-level Panel on Water. They are quite straightforward and quite broad. One of them, the first is, recognize and embrace all values related to water. The second is reconcile different values and build trust between different values perspectives. The third is protect the sources. I think that is a concern of everyone. The fourth, very interestingly, educate to empower. And with empowerment, that is a way to rebalance the weight of values perspective in decision making. And the fourth is innovate and invest. Let me take the first, the recognize and embrace. It relates to understanding water, understanding diversity and appreciating that diversity. A indigenous group will attach different importance to certain values, spiritual rituals involving the river, for instance, than a commercial farmer who wants to produce more tomatoes or flowers or whatever. Reconcile values and build trust. If we see different values footprint in different institutions and different decisions, the question is if one values perspective dominates in most decisions and other values perspectives have much less influence, that is not a good recipe to build trust. If you want to build trust, different groups have to find their values perspectives resonating in decision-making in institutions. And that would be a way to build trust. If decisions just are dominated by one perspective, it erodes trust and it enhances fragility. Educate to empower is probably the most important of the 5 principles, at least in my current thinking. First, I thought, reconciling and building trust is the most important. But if you want to change, if you're talking transition, if something has to change, then empowerment is probably the core, the key to that. If we don't empower groups that are going to propel us forward to that desired situation, we're going to get more of the same. What will it mean for Africa? The values perspective are different across continents. There's 50 years of social science research on values perspectives across the world. The World Values Survey has been doing that since the early 80s. We know that values are different between different societies, and we also know that they change only very slowly over a generation. So valuing water is a different thing in a different place. So valuing water in Africa means African values that safeguard your traditions, but that also enable the change that you desire. And another domain of these values is, am I thinking about me and my group, or am I thinking about the common good and, what is good for all of us? Is it an us versus them, or is it a collaborative values orientation? So those choices have to be made everywhere, also in Africa. I think, valuing water is about making better decisions, and better decisions will need to address the fragmentation of capacity, fragmentation of institutions. They will need to enable all the things that need to change in Africa. They will need to be fit for purpose. And doing so will strengthen social contract. And with, I think, 22 out of 54 countries in Africa, at least in the World Bank rankings, identified as fragile, this building trust and building trust through water could be a powerful trajectory. My last point, how can UN 2023 be meaningful in this respect? I think the criteria for the conference, it has to be inclusive, different values perspective, try to balance them in a way that enables the future transition. A multi-sector, most of the water managers are not in the room here probably. They are not the ones who call themselves water managers, but they are the farmers, the urban dwellers, the corporations, the it has to be multi-sector and it has to be action and result oriented to feed this water action agenda, which is the proposed outcome of the conference. There will not be a negotiated outcome. It will be a collection of voluntary commitments from across the world. And, you know, valuing water could be an element of that. Thank you.
Put the two chairs so that the presentation from both. Let's put the two chairs, please. I think for us to be able to make this a bit more interactive, may we have the two, Alessandra and Martin, because I think you're leaving us, just the two of them. Please come and join us so that we can interact with the, I can have a couple of questions and then the audience can also pose their questions, please. Okay, I'll start, I think, from you. Educate and empower. Of course, can you elaborate on the 2 or 3 items that should be considered under this that we should be promoting, especially in the presence of our policymakers or guardians of the policy, that they should provide for us as an enabling environment to take for this to take root and therefore recognize the different values that we attach to water and also how we get it into as a framework that can also help us make the business case for water in development planning.
Okay. I mean, well, knowledge it should be the basis for decision making. And if our knowledge expands, if we know more, you know, we may sort of shift decision making. I think there's another process at stake. Decision making is often influenced by the stories that we believe in. And in an era of transition, the stories that we believe in will be stories informed by the past. Those may not be so valid anymore in you know, when the new normal sets in, the new normal in a situation of climate change or a situation of you know, rapid urban expansion. We need to take that knowledge on board. And it's not necessarily through the science, but it may be through the stories that change, informed by the science. The other element of empowerment is, if you want to change a society, different voices need to come up. You know, doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome is Einstein said that that's not. You can do that over and over again, but it's not going to happen. So in order to get different perspective to influence decision making, something in the balance of power has to change. And the way to do that is empowerment. And I think we've had a number of sessions in Stockholm Water Week where this empowerment of groups or individuals or leaders at the high political level, but also leaders, you know, from the bottom up, who promote decisions and solutions that benefit the common good. I think that is an important thing. And through empowering such individuals or groups, giving them more space from the bottom up, but also making more space from the top down, can help in going through these difficult transitions.
Well, I would like to put you a bit on the spot because the question I want to answer is, I'm speaking to him as my Minister of Finance. I'm a water manager. How would you empower me, educate me and empower me to speak at the same wavelength for him to increase the funding that I might need to manage my water resource to be effective in the management of the resource?
Okay, let's be concrete. Yesterday, there was a World Bank public expenditure review of the water sector. Only 72% of budget appropriations to the water sector in developing countries is actually spent. 28% is not being spent. So there is more public money available than is being absorbed. Another thing, the subsidies in the system, 56% of the subsidies aggregate at the top 20 percentile of the income pyramid. 6% aggregate at the bottom, these are not country specific, but across the board averages. So I would say educate. I mean, so these are the figures. We can dream about pension funds, about blended finance, about private investors, but if we do not get our public finance system in order to absorb the budgets appropriated, and if we do not allocate those public funds efficiently, then, you know, that is the first thing. So you as a water minister, or as a water manager, and you as the water minister, I mean, water minister, you know, get, I don't know what you need, cadres from the Ministry of Finance. We need to be able to absorb the finance that we get. And, you know, and then you can do your job. Is that specific?
It's a start, but I think the audience will follow up on that. Coming to Dr. Alfieri. The system has been around for quite some time now. What at a policy level? I've noted quite a number of interactions. We know how we, at country level, how cross-sectoral interactions can be a bit difficult, especially across ministries. What would you recommend in front of our policy custodians? What are those recommendations that you could put to them that can provide the enabling environment to make that system work or be institutionalized to assure that we have access to that information as robustly as is sufficient to make the informed decisions that can, going back to that issue of increasing allocations to the sector?
I mean, I think that this is very much one of the big challenges in having kind of getting the buy-in from the different institutions, because in a sense, data is power, and each agency tends to keep it for itself rather than sharing it. And this, I mean, I think links a little bit to what you were saying of education and really bringing everybody, giving them space to everyone to sit around the table and to understand how bringing together all the information from these different sources actually benefits everyone. It's not, I mean, keeping the information only on one single agency is you can only do certain things, but going more, bringing all the stakeholders together and say, if we integrate this information, then these are the type of indicators that can be derived, and these are the type of policies that can be influenced by having an integrated information system, is something that would be useful. I mean, and I do agree that it's nice to have stories. Maybe I think what should be facilitated, and having countries that are more advanced than others to bring their stories to the table and have basically a sharing experiences between countries of the same region that have already learned and are already a step ahead, let's say, from the other countries.
Thank you very much. I'll now open it up to the floor. I note there is a hand there. There is a hand that will start from. Yes, please. I'll do that.
Yes, my name is Tom Dyer from AMCOW Group. I was thinking as well, should we not make more business cases out of what the value is of data? Because there's not enough investment in data collection and monitoring. And when there is data in many countries, institutions will sit on it, will not share it. You will have to do everything possible to get data. But I assume if we can show how economic development can work through making data available, that might maybe trigger a few things.
Thank you very much. We'll take the second question.
Good afternoon. My name is Juan Pablo Romero. I'm an independent consultant, and I work in applied environmental economics. Hence, I love this topic. So thank you for your presentation. My understanding of valuation is a communication tool because it shows the importance of a resource, and that importance allows you to reach conclusions on how to allocate the resource. So in order to achieve that SEEA, you need a ton of information. I'm from Colombia, and as you were showing, we are very advanced in the process, but at the beginning, there was not enough information. So you get a process like it's the chicken and the egg, you know, because you need to have all this information to take the decision. But then you need to make the decisions in order the resource not to decay. So my question is how to countercount the need for information and the need, I mean, the requirements of information to implement this and the needs of information for policy making in order to what you were saying to political will to implement the things that need to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other question? I'll put it to, oh, yes, Honorable Minister.
Thank you. Mine is a very simple one. And that is, how do you bring in risk in this valuation? In normal man's language, how do you factor in the consequence of not providing water because of a lack of resources?
Thank you. Okay, the last question, I think, is in the interest of time, sorry.
Thank you. My name is Andreas Brandner, Knowledge for Development Partnership. And I'm working specifically also in cooperation with AMCOW on the topic of water knowledge management. And you have been talking about data, information, knowledge, and how this should be disseminated and availed to many. The concept of knowledge management has developed over the last 20 years, very consequently in the UN system. How would you envision knowledge management for the water sector? That is my question.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have our work cut out for the 4 questions. I'll start with you.
Oh, it's a very difficult question on knowledge management. How would I envision that? It sounds so abstract, yeah, for the water sector. I would, and I think again, it's at the water sector, the water community, is water a sector? I mean, we are all, many of us are in fact water managers. So I think the point of knowledge management for the water sector is not, maybe that's not the point. It is about knowledge management about water in society much more broadly. The funny thing is, every day that we open a global newspaper or even a local newspaper, now there are stories about water. So it is somewhere in our minds, but in policy making processes, at least in my country, where there are also these headlines for drought at the moment, it hardly triggers. So, I mean, I think it's the $1,000 question. I don't know what the answer is.
I'll address your question later. I'll start with the investment in data, and I think that this is really very much hits the nail on the head, because it's really the issue of investing in data collection, the activities of the National Statistical Office is very important. I mean, especially when we talk with in the water world, or in let's say in the environment world more broadly, the data is very dispersed, and there is not, for me, a plan to collect and compile this data in a systematic way. And there is very little investment in this data. I mean, I think the SDG brought a little bit of attention to this topic, but this idea of getting more money to collect and compiling data and giving the value of data as an important factor in the decision-making process still is a battle that we are actually fighting within the broad UN statistical community. In terms of how do we operationalize this information, these accounts, if data is not available, I mean, the initial step is usually trying to bring together all the data which is available. And when we talk about value, I think one thing I would like to stress that it's not only value in terms of dollars, but it's also value in terms of the contribution of water to economic activity, economic development, and to society. In terms of, for example, water use or water availability, also the physical information is very important. So it's a whole developing the whole information system associated with water, which is related to the economy and to society more broadly. So that's, I think, that the contribution of what the SEA does is moving away only from the water management, as you say, but going into other spaces, bringing it, using this accounting approach and linking it to the national accounts is also linking it to agriculture, to industry, to households use. So it's much broader than saying I only talk to the water people. And I mean, in terms of risks, what you were asking, I think that this is a very good point. Now are starting to also think in this space and say, how do we take into account the risks when making our decisions? And so there is all this movement in developing business accounting standards, which are actually increasingly being aligned with the system of environmental economic accounting, in the sense that we will have business standards aligned with the macro standards, so that the compilation of information will become more easier. What the accounts do as the system of national accounts, we look only backwards. We don't look forwards, but the information that is generated with the national accounts and with the SEA can be used as an input into developing models to assess risks, because we learn from what we know from the past. And in terms of knowledge and knowledge management, I mean, for me, what would be, I think, the objective is really is this idea of moving beyond GDP. That is now something that is really one of the manifestos of the Secretary General of the UN. And I think that water should be really sit at be one of the important component of moving this beyond GDP and developing these sets of, so as GDP is released every year or every quarter, in a lot of countries, then we need to also have additional indicators that are released with the GDP to really show a bigger picture of what of how the broader economy and society is going. So it's emissions, air emissions, energy use, and water, because those are important indicators that need to be part of the broader discussion and have to be really at the table from the beginning. So what you were saying, it's on the newspaper because now there is a crisis, but I mean, this is a long-term crisis and people have to start to think and to monitor this information on a regular basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's, I think we'll end the technical session here. We'll, as we move, before we move into the high-level discussion, we'll invite the Botswana, our representative from Botswana, to share with us the experience, taking it from what she has just concluded with.
Good afternoon, Honorable Ministers, Your Excellency. delegates here present. My name is Nchizi Mulawa, Deputy Permanent Secretary responsible for water and sanitation. And let me first thank AMCOW for setting up this discussion. I understand that I have a few minutes to talk, so I'll try to move fast and summarize. Botswana started implementing the national accounting system in 2012. This was really more of a structured and formalized way of reporting our accounts. But we have been recording the information pretty much for time immemorial. It's only that after 2012, that's when a system was put in place. So when that system has been put in place, we are supported by the World Bank to actually start the implementation of that. It was really focused on water, energy, minerals, and microeconomic indicators. Personally, I had the opportunity to be involved in the minerals and the water because historically our ministry was Ministry of Minerals, Energy and Water. So therefore, our ministry had an opportunity to actually pilot or run with 3 or 2 accounts at the same time and with a lot of learnings. These accounts have actually assisted us in formulation of our policy briefs, even updating of existing strategies, because we are now able to collect this data, analyze it with all other sectors, and actually reach some strategic decisions. I know some of it becomes very difficult when you start engaging in it, but at the end of the day, you might ultimately decide otherwise, but the information will be there for you to make an informed decision. It also helps us assess the water allocations and utilization of the water across the various industries. That slide there basically gives us a glimpse of a typical report, which will show what will transpire. As you could see, agriculture is one of those users that will consume a lot of water with very little impact to the GDP and employment. And rightfully so. And when you start looking at this account and look at what the latest developments associated with issues around Ukraine, you could see that issues of food security is actually critical. And therefore, the fact that the agricultural sector is not that productive, at least in Botswana context, shows that certainly there's a lot of effort that is required to actually improve the efficiency of the water that is currently utilized. Mining, obviously, being the highest in the country, does show that, yes, indeed, mining performs very well, highly efficient, a lot of recycling of water, and producing quite valuable resources. And you also see all other industries. So with that alone, it does give the context in terms of where the policy needs to be shifted and where our attention needs to be focused. In actual fact, in April, beginning of April this year, His Excellency, the President, decided to reshuffle all other ministries, all functions, and reorganize most of the functions to ensure that they are streamlined and we do focus in other areas. And issues of water for agriculture, for the first time, has been shifted towards our ministry, such that as and when we deal with issues of domestic supply, we can also see how we can effectively and efficiently address that performance that is coming out of that. And that snapshot basically shows the level of abstractions that have been for dating back as far back as the 90s. You will see that over time, the water abstraction continues to grow. And groundwater remains our largest source of water. in as much as we do have large water schemes where we are transferring water from the north to supply the southern and the eastern area of the country. But we still remain significantly a water deficit country, requiring significant water to actually meet just the basic domestic needs. So that schematic diagram shows the level of investment. And I think for Botswana context, currently water projects or the water portfolio carries the highest development budget in the country, which definitely shows that some of this information does help to actually go to Ministry of Finance and sell our case to actually show that it is absolutely necessary for us to get a significant chunk of the revenue. Our policy briefs or our accounts are published on that site there, the Waves account or website. This basically a platform where all other nations do put in their information so that there can be information sharing across. I've tried to be very brief, and I hope I've managed to capture most of the salient points. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before we move into the ministerial segment, I wanted to capture something that I don't know if I got you correctly. You're saying that after implementation of the system of these accounts, the sector still has the smallest development budget. Is that, did I get it?
No, it's the largest.
The largest. Oh, okay, that I got.
In actual fact, the last financial year, we actually ran out of money. We exhausted our entire development budget by November. And our financial year runs up to the 31st of March. So we actually had to go to Parliament to beg so that we can get some more supplementary funding to be able to push some of the projects that we are doing. And this emanates, we have what we call the Water Master Plan. This Water Master Plan does lay out the sort of projects that needs to be developed internally. And it also talks to the transboundary projects that we also need to deal with. The Honorable Minister from South Africa did indicate some of the projects. There are some that we are talking to or dealing with our neighbors in Namibia. There are others that we are also dealing with in the Zambezi Basin as well. So all those strategic projects are just to ensure that as a region, as a country also, we do achieve that. It's still a long way, but I think some efforts are there. The biggest learnings that we got as a country was in 2015. I think we had the biggest drought that we have ever had, where there was literally, even in the capital city, we're rationing water. And you can imagine we're rationing water, we're also rationing power. It was from the same ministry. So the other colleagues were calling us the Minister of Darkness and Thirst. So that's how tough it was. Then from that, we had a lot of learnings. We implemented a lot of strategies to ensure that that doesn't repeat again. So those sort of pictures that we are seeing on pipelines and everything, we are busy trying to build a lot of resilience, because we know that the next drought is expected to hit us around 2025, 2026. Because over the years, although we talk about history, or some of this data being historic, but the history have told us that we are having 10-year cyclical droughts consistently. And that time, our dam in Gaborone, the Gaborone Dam, will pretty much run dry at that particular point. So we know that whatever that we are doing, we are trying to make sure that in 2025, 2026, we are not finding ourselves in the streets being thrown out because we have not planned sufficiently to ensure that there is sufficient resilience in dealing with the drought that will come.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Is there a single question, a single burning question for him before we can move into the high-level discussion? Okay. Did you have your hand up? Okay, so let's set up for the, yeah. Thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, we've heard it from our technical facilitators. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. I think we are now trying to sort out the technical elements, but as this go on, I would like to invite the AMCOW president, Honorable Carl Herman Gustav Schletvin, the Minister of Agriculture for Water and Land Reform, the Republic of Namibia, to come and take his seat at this point. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. We'll also have, allow me as we start on our high-level panel session to recognize the presence of Honorable Engineer Philip Lansana, the Minister for Water Resources of the Republic of Sierra Leone. My apologies for the earlier not recognizing. Okay. Okay. And I will take that opportunity to also invite you to join us. I would also like to invite our Honorable Minister for Water Resources of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Engineer Suleiman Adam. Okay. We'll also have, okay, he's still engaged. We'll also have our Honorable Minister from Ethiopia, His Excellency Dr. Asfaw Dingamo Kame, the Minister of State for Water Supply and Sanitation of the Federal Republic of, the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. Okay. And last but not least, we shall have our Minister for Public Service and Administration under the Ministry of Water and Sanitation of the Republic of South Africa, Honorable Senzo. Pardon me, I don't know how to pronounce that very well. Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Excellencies, Honorable Ministers. We've heard it from the technical experts. They've shared what they have identified as the solutions to raising the profile of water within the systems of our economic and development planning. They've also highlighted a number of challenges, some of which touch on policy issues or providing the enabling environment for them to be able to generate the data, to gather the data and generate the information and knowledge that they can then apply to make a business case for investing in water. I think maybe the point of departure for us would be that starting from Honorable Adam, is there a system of water accounting within the Republic of Nigeria, or what is the status of development of such a system if it's considered as a factor that can contribute to increasing the financial outlook for the sector?
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think I would say that basically we have a system of accounting, but not in the context that we're talking today. We have an accounting system that tells us how good we're doing or how bad we're doing in terms of water resources. Although the country, we accept that water is an economic commodity, but I think there's been no deliberate linkage. We just assume, not necessarily working on the numbers to ensure, to see how in absolute terms, water is impacting on the economy. And going forward, I think this is something we must do. In the last 3 years, we've been doing what we call the Washdown Report, Water Sanitation and Hygiene National Outcome Routine Mapping. We'll be looking at the economics of it. Basically, how our water utilities are doing, and then to the level of to what extent, how much households are spending, I mean, that kind of stuff. But really, having a linkage with the economy has not been there, and it's something that has been troubling for us. As you know, Abuja based in this administration has been championing the issue of, Nigeria is becoming a major rice producer now. We're looking at really boosting agriculture. And one day the Rice Farmers Association of Nigeria came to me and said that, look, we think your ministry is not being given the credit that it deserves, because all the successes we've been making associated with rice production wouldn't have been possible without the irrigation systems in place, without the water resources that we've been using. Because we've been producing like 3 times, we're not producing rice like in 3 cycles in a given year. Our average rainfall is just about 6 months, but we plant rice for like 9 months. So obviously, irrigation plays a major role. So I think going forward, this is something that we need to expand the Washington report to include issues like this economic value, as we've learned from this discussion. And I'm sure that will help a long way to support our argument always that water is life, and it needs to be given the prominence it deserves. You find out everywhere, even in Africa, under the African Union, water is tucked under agriculture. It's just not there. It's not given the prominence because people just take it for granted. And I think we have to change that narrative.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I'll take it to the Honorable Minister from the Republic of South Africa. From what we've heard from the UNSEEA, I think South Africa is an African champion on the implementation of that system. What, from a policy perspective and also an enabling environment perspective, what can you share with our member states, or the recommendations that you would charge us as the water managers to go and ensure becomes the policy reforms we promote to our other member states that can also benefit from the experience you had utilizing this system?
Thank you very much. Some time ago, I think it would be 2010, 11, we set out to develop what came to be known as a National Development Plan. Before that, we had been a bit, I don't want to be harsh, but it would have been like a bit of wishy-washy in terms of our vision for a specific period up to that time. It was then thought that in order for us to marshal all our resources towards a common vision in the country, involving different aspects that would determine the path in broad terms for South Africa, we needed to develop what came to be known as the National Development Plan. Now, one of the fields that this encompassed was a call. It called for the strategy for natural capital accounting, which at that time wasn't actually developed, and I must say we still have a long way to go. But that started and is proceeding very well. But as the name calls, it's not something that one department can do. It needed to be collaborated on with other departments. For instance, there's a department called Department of Environmental Fisheries and Forestry, or Forestry and Fisheries. That's one department that has been put together over time. And then there's another, State South Africa, and there's an institute, Biodiversity Institute. All of these departments have collaborated over time to develop a strategy and a system of accounting that is natural capital accounting. it's emerging, and it's emerging with good shape and good prospects of success, so that we are able to sort of ring fence this as a very important aspect, so that we are able to see whether we're declining, our natural resources are declining, or they're at level. And as it stands, we reached a point at some point where we became aware that there were declines, for instance, on natural fresh water. It was through this system that we're able to get that indicator. It has got all the necessary indicators, although I'm saying not yet fully developed into a dynamic area of our work as we would want it to be at a later stage, but it has already yielded positive results. And I think, other countries would have a different way of doing this, but in South Africa, this is how we have developed and are developing a system of natural capital accounting. And we think that good cause. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Perhaps then I'll take it to the Honorable Minister from Ethiopia. What strategies do you think will improve the evaluation of water towards advancing Africa's development, using Ethiopia as a case study?
Thank you very much, Honorable Ministers, and co-chair, and friends and colleagues. As you know, Ethiopian context concerned, the issue of water is becoming one of very critical in this changing environment, as the climate change is creating a lot of problems here and there, and the demand for water is becoming very big. Second issue is, you know, the investment. The investment, as there are competing sectors are too many, and sometimes, you know, bringing and harmonizing all those efforts together is very important. Taking into account all these issues, we have developed, you know, one wash program in the country, which brings many ministries together, especially the Ministry of Water, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Finance, which is already the nerve of this, and also the Authority of Environment and others, you know, to work together to tackle, you know, a problem of water supply and sanitation in the country. Because we are working in this program, even organizing also the donor community to come in to have the funds in one basket and produce one report, one finance, one guideline, and integrate the resources all together. And also we have a wider approach on public-private partnership, which is very important here, because always all the efforts of government funded or government managed sectors are no more sustainable generally. So we are integrating the private sector also together to bring all efforts together and solve the problems. So we have seen when we have implemented this kind of partnership approach in one WASH program, results have been already noted. Apart of that, we have the same problem the colleague from Botswana said, as changing environment is creating also subsequent drought in those areas where the water resource is very scarce, and both the surface and the groundwater is a big challenge nowadays, not only from the climate change issue, also the scarcity of the contracting parties are also one of the major area, as the prices are going up for contracting out the projects of water, which traditionally once it was very cheap, and now become 4 or 5-fold expensive. And this has hampered also a big chunk of our projects. So to solve this, we have integrated the public, the private sector, and also the government itself, to solve these issues. Another area where we have started to implement is the climate resilient programs in those areas where the drought is recurrent, and we have got also very important victory in some of those parts of pastoralistic community in harvesting the rainfall as well. And this is what we are.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Coming to you, Honorable Ansana. From the Sierra Leone's perspective, from a policy angle, what strategies are you applying or employing to assure sufficient allocations to the sector for the development of the resource and its utilization, as well as its management?
Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The first thing is we looked at the policy itself. We had an old policy which was established, which was developed in 2010. And it was really based on the MDGs, because that time we were looking at achieving the MDG, which was the deadline was 2015. So that has been revised to reflect the SDGs. And again, what we do also is to ensure that we engage other players within the government. For instance, when we were developing that policy, we did not only limit it to water resources, but we involved or we included health as well. So you can say it was WASH, called the complete WASH, which involved not only my ministry, but the Ministry of Health. And also the Ministry of Education was also involved in it, because we provide water for the schools. The Ministry of Local Government was involved in it, because the rural water has been devolved to the local councils. And of course, Ministry of Development and Ministry of Finance are all involved in this process. In addition to that, also, we have a very big challenge in the human activities in the various catchment areas, and we alone cannot do it. So therefore, we also involve other ministries, of course, through the assistance of the presidency, where an interministerial committee was formed. And that interministerial committee, headed by the chief minister, ensures that monies are put together to protect the catchment areas. So by that, we are getting additional funding relating to the water sector. Also, recently, we've developed a water fund, which I'm sure it's been established in Kenya as well as in South Africa, but with the help of an NGO, CRS, where we are to get a basket fund wherein we'll use to protect the catchment areas. And that one is going on successfully. The other thing that we've done as a country is to make sure that we have a framework of operation with the NGOs, especially international NGOs. They have a lot of resources. Of course, they get it individually, but when it's put together, it's quite significant. So what we have done is to really make sure that we coordinate the activities as strongly as possible, whereby we go into a service level agreement with them. And when that happens, whatever funding is coming, we're aware of it. And we also help them we direct where these funds will be used. So by that, we getting more money into the sector. by doing all those cooperative or collaborative activities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll come to the AMCOW president. You are very passionate about making the link between water, economic production, energy production, and political stability. What strategies, this is for the internet, for the people online, yes. Yeah. Share your vision on this and how you think we can implement it or promote it vis-a-vis the incommensurate funding that we have as a sector to make this happen.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, let me start by agreeing with the importance of data, with the importance of consider water as the most valuable resource that we have, and by translating this data into a decision-making process that enables us to resource the development well. So I don't want to dwell on those things anymore. I think we all agree we don't have to preach to convert it. I was fascinated by the theme of this conference, namely seeing the unseen. And there are some things that we apparently are not seeing which needs fixing. Now, the first thing that I think needs fixing is this impression that we are left with, that we are working in an environment where funds are scarce. I think that must be debunked, that theory. Because if I see what the Ukraine war swallows up, what we ourselves budget for activities that are actually destructive, then there is an abundance of money available that could be done and utilized much more appropriate. So I think what we don't see is that we have a wrong set of priorities which we resource. And that needs some addressing quickly, because we have now a situation where through climate change and the calamity that water disasters will bring about is a much more important and severe security crisis than a neighbor we don't like. We have to consider water not only as a valuable resource, but now we have to look into the risk that is coming up when we do not address water. So that's the first point. We have enough money. We must just reprioritize. The second issue that I want to classify as an unseen that needs to be seen is this story about GDP. I think it is not, first of all, it's not an accurate measure of a status of a country. It ignores skewness in any economy. It ignores the social sector of any country completely. And I may use Namibia as an example. We are classified by the World Bank as a high middle income country. Now, the result of that classification is actually a deprivation of access to concessional funding. We have approached the African Development Bank to fund our water development program, but we were limited because they told us as a high middle income country, you can only take about that debt. Thereafter, it's not sustainable, so no more. The principle is that financial consideration of the World Bank becomes more important than bring the life-giving resource to the people of the country. And that is only because they think the classification is correct. A high middle income country, that is Namibia. But Namibia has at the same time the skewest economy. We have 80% of our people that live below the breadline and only 20% that live way above it. And that brings the middle income country status up. We are not embarrassed by the status. I think it's a good thing. But the consequences of that status is a very severe one. We are having no access to money. We must now borrow at commercial rates for social programs, for HIV/AIDS campaigns, for COVID. And then on the other hand, COVID gave us another example. In spite of being a high middle income country, that means you are a country that can be trusted. The financial system can be trusted. It is reliable. When we ordered COVID vaccines and we paid for them, we didn't get them. Because someone who is richer than we hoarded them. Now, those are the unseens that we have to address. If we want to give equality a chance, if we want to give fair or fairness is probably not the right word, you know, it's equitable socio-economic development a chance, then we must take equitability to the bottom also, to us small countries that are really at the brunt of it when it comes to suffering the consequences of any calamity, whether it is a water disaster, whether it is a drought disaster, whether it is a financial crisis. So I think that would be my contribution, that I think we have to concentrate on over and above what we agree already, that is the technical aspects of water. Those unseens need to be fixed.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I think there is a question I wanted to have for you, cross-sector financing. It is, yes, you've talked about water for agriculture, water for energy, water for sanitation. Have you had any success with cross-sector financing? Because yes, one can argue that for you to be able to provide energy, water can become a limiting factor. But it's very easy to make a concession for energy, but when the water is not managed well, the energy might not be available. Have you had any success, or what recommendations would you make for us to be able to assure cross-sector financing to prop up the resources that we can have at our disposal to manage and effectively develop the sector to assure success in the other sectors where it's utilized?
Well, again, I would like to say that we're just evolving, and this is new. But as you know, Nigeria, for instance, is also a hydropower country, and we really don't put the economy. I don't think we've been putting the real economic values in absolute terms. What you see is that, for instance, the major hydropower schemes that we have, of course, the concession now, they used to be owned by government. And the concessionaires are making money, but they don't want to pay the licenses for the water, even though when they were given a concession for that for a couple of years that has expired. So it's really, I don't think we're really getting it right, honestly, in all aspects of this. And I must admit that, but when I go back after this conference, I think the situation is going to change, because we have to start looking at things differently. That's just all I can say.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Perhaps a question or two for our ministers. Then I'm told our time is almost up. Okay. Salut. En français?
Speak in French? C'est possible. Okay. Est-ce que si je peux pas parler français, il y a quelqu'un qui peut me traduire? En anglais, quelqu'un peut me traduire? Hein? Personne ne peut.
Oui.
Non, je vais parler en français et puis voilà. Donc, je voudrais dire que en ce qui concerne la Mauritanie, on vient de développer une stratégie du secteur de l'eau et l'assainissement.
So for Mauritania is developing a strategy
L'eau et l'assainissement.
for water and sanitation.
Cette stratégie, elle elle se base sur 5 axes.
The strategy is based sur 5 axes.
Le premier axe, c'est l'amélioration des connaissances des ressources en eau pour une gestion intégrée et durable.
The first axe or pillar is knowledge management for integrated water resource management.
Le deuxième et le troisième axe, c'est la généralisation de l'accès à l'eau potable et à l'accès aux services d'assainissement.
The following is, sorry, can you repeat? Yeah, water and sanitation access, to generalize the access to water and sanitation.
L'accès, donc également l'eau pour l'agriculture qui est le premier usager, le premier usage de l'eau, c'est l'agriculture. L'eau pour l'agriculture, c'est le quatrième axe.
The fourth pillar is water for agriculture, which is the main water user.
L'élevage et pour les mines.
And water for livestock and for mining.
Le cinquième axe qui peut être un axe qui va abriter la comptabilité nationale de l'eau, c'est la gouvernance du secteur de l'eau en général. La gouvernance, l'amélioration de la gouvernance de l'eau.
And the fifth one is water governance axe. Yeah.
La gouvernance, elle vise donc une amélioration de la performance des opérateurs qui au niveau du secteur, mais également, il vise également le développement du partenariat public-privé de l'eau.
Sorry, can you repeat again?
Donc, c'est l'amélioration des performances du secteur et le développement du partenariat public.
So the improving governance of water sector actors and public-private partnerships.
La comptabilité nationale de l'eau, donc, est un point qui va pouvoir être développé au niveau de la gouvernance.
The national water accounting is a point that will improve the governance.
On a quand même constaté que cette stratégie qui a été donc faite il y a 2 ans, il y a certaines lacunes dans cette stratégie.
But we have observed that there's a certain weakness in this strategy.
La réponse, c'est la réponse aux urgences. La réponse aux urgences aux urgences pour le secteur.
It is how to respond to emergencies or priorities in the sector.
Les urgences, il y a là. L'urgence qui a été, donc c'est 2019, c'est un peu la COVID. La réponse du secteur de l'eau à la COVID ça a demandé une réponse justement du secteur de l'eau. Et là, le gouvernement, pendant la période critique du secteur de la COVID, il a décidé de donner l'accès gratuit à l'eau potable. Donc, toutes les populations en milieu rural vivaient de l'eau gratuitement, ne payaient pas la facture de l'eau.
An example of this responding to emergencies is with the COVID pandemic. The sector had decided to give free access to water.
Et ce n'était pas prévu. Le deuxième donc urgence, c'est un peu les inondations. Actuellement, la Mauritanie connaît des inondations et il y a une ville qui a pratiquement été et donc c'est ça qui fait que voilà, il y a ces 2 problèmes qui doivent normalement être traités par une gestion de l'urgence.
So responding to COVID was not something that had been foreseen in the strategy, and another emergency is country has been facing is flooding, which has also had not been foreseen in the strategy.
My sincere apologies. I've had to interrupt. Yeah, we had to interrupt. But we have an opportunity. We can continue our discussion at the AMCOW Pavilion on 4th floor, room 462, where we have an informal interaction where we can continue with all these questions. Right now, the next session has to start and we need to vacate the room. My sincere apologies. Sorry. Thank you very much.